Hello, welcome to another episode of the Daily Seeds of Flourishing. In this episode we're going to be specifically looking at album trilogies, and even more granular than that, those of Grace Jones. So again, to keep this tight, I'm just going to set myself up a timer for 10 minutes. And off we go. So Grace Jones, here's a picture of her in 2015. But before we start to talk a little bit about Grace Jones as an artist and why I've always found her so interesting on lots of different levels, one of which is her sort of aesthetic, if you like. The question of album trilogies, when people talk about album trilogies, they're probably most familiar with the David Bowie Berlin trilogy of Low, Heroes and Lodger. Now there's lots of websites on the internet which discuss album trilogies, and if you Google album trilogies, obviously you get a number of those. I'm going to include links in for everything I'm talking about in this episode. But specifically, there's a couple here, one on the Trilogies site, 10 Essential Album Trilogies, and another on vinylmeplease.com. You'll see quite a bit of overlap with some of these lists where the usual suspects come up. Pretty much you'll always see the David Bowie trilogy mentioned. Often there's the sort of non-chronological trilogy of the three Cure albums that are often placed together. What I'm talking about today is actually specifically trilogies that are also chronological in order. Now, probably the first time I exposed myself to trilogies, and this was probably inadvertently, is I have two younger brothers. And obviously growing up there was quite a bit of conflict, as there always is, but one thing where we used to have like an oasis of calm was on a Sunday afternoon. We'd congregate in my brother's bedroom because they shared a bedroom and it was slightly bigger, and we'd listen to albums, and we'd often listen to them in order. And of course back then there was no internet, so it made it really interesting in terms of musical discovery. Now, as I was thinking this through, just before I was ready to record this, there were two bands specifically at that point that sprang to mind. One was Judas Priest, and we often would listen to Stay in Class, Killing Machine and British Steel in that order. So we were already starting to gravitate around listening to albums often in order in which they released. And another trilogy of albums we often would listen to back then would be Thin Lizzy with Fighting, Jailbreak and Johnny the Fox. And with these three specifically, of course, that was the same lineup through all three albums as well. And often you may find that with a trilogy, not always, but often the lineups are similar. And another one that was popular is we'd often listen to the first three Police albums, so Outlanders d'Amour, Regatta de Blanc, and Zenyatta Mondata, again as a trilogy. Now, I've been thinking a lot again about album trilogies in the last week or so, which is why it's sort of come up in this particular episode. And one artist I wanted to sort of re-explore, because now we're in a world where we have the benefit, if we have a Spotify account, of basically listening to anything that's on Spotify and enjoying it chronological if we wish to. And what I've started doing is I normally create these 3 album playlists now, and I listen to them one pass through, and this is what I did on the Sunday just gone. I listened to one pass through in the order. And then this morning, while I was out doing my normal morning walking, which I was talking about, I think in the first episode, my normal morning walk, although not at sunrise today. Had a little bit of a line this morning. But yeah, I then put it on shuffle. I think that's two good ways of looking at it. Is one, to do it chronologically, and then take that playlist and put it on shuffle and see what happens, and see how you experience it. So I did that with Grace Jones, and the 3 albums I did it with were Warm Leatherette, Night Clubbing, and Living My Life. These form a really nice trilogy of Grace Jones studio albums. So the thing about these 3 albums is these were recorded at Compass Point, and they marked a slight change in that Grace Jones was bringing in all these different styles. So she was sort of moving from, I suppose, the disco orientated sound into this amalgamation of new wave, reggae, post-punk and pop, and also recording at Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas. She had the benefit of this awesome backing band, who were at the time, I believe, referred to as the Compass Point All-Stars, and still are. Now, with these trilogies, a lot of the tracks are covers, but it's interesting to hear Grace Jones and all the other contributors take on those covers. And the other thing, as I was reviewing what was on the albums, is just the amount of singles that were released off of these. So the first one that was recorded at Compass Point, which was Warm Leatherette, there were 8 tracks on the album originally, and there were 7 singles off of that album, all released in 1980. So the album came out May 1980, and you had all these singles drop. It's got some great covers on here. My favourite stuff is is Warm Leatherette, which was a Daniel Miller song. That was, I think, when he released it, it would have been The Normal. Would have been, the name of the project at that time. And of course, the cover of Private Life by the Pretenders, and Love Is a Drug as well. So yeah, I really love this first album that was recorded at Compass Point. If you move on to Night Clubbing, again, there are a number of covers on here. If you look again, that's 6 singles off a total of, 9 tracks. Now, there are a number of originals on here as well, I think. I say a number. Got some here. But then we've got things like Night Clubbing, and also, this is really good, the Demolition Man cover, which is originally a Sting song. And then we move into the third album, which would be Living My Life. 5 singles from, did I just skip over that? 7 tracks. Slightly more originals on here than previous albums, and again, great tracks on here. I don't know whether the singles did as well. So that's the trilogy. But then, what was interesting is, post trilogy, we then have the release of Slave to the Rhythm. And that was recorded between the Compass Point trilogy and then, Grace Jones' acting career as well. And The Slave to the Rhythm track was a massive hit, and it became Jones's biggest chart success. But what's interesting about the trilogy and in the subsequent development of Grace Jones's movie career and other things is the aesthetic as well. A lot of, at the time, she was heavily involved with Jean-Paul Gaultier or Gode, I don't know how that's pronounced, and he contributed a lot to her artwork and other things, and he was a partner at the time. Interesting side bit of trivia, Grace Jones was also involved in a relationship with my mind's just gone blank now, I'm going to have to look it up, it's on the tip of my tongue. The actor that was, where's it gone? Dolph Lundgren, who was her former bodyguard, and she got him a part as a KGB officer in A View to a Kill. So a worthy rabbit hole to go down, particularly that period in Grace Jones's career. And of course, again, depends on how old you are, but of course I remember her from Conan the Destroyer as well. And then one last thing, because I can see I've run over here a little bit from what I was aiming for time-wise. Compass Point Studio itself, super interesting. ACD's Back in Black was recorded there. I'd mentioned about the backing band, and Sly and Robbie, fantastic rhythm section. That gets onto a separate discussion about rhythm sections as well. You think about Geezer Butler and Bill Ward from Sabbath, or the drum and bass players from a band like Warpaint. How these rhythm sections really mesh and play around one another. And Sly and Robbie as a rhythm section are a great example of that. But the whole band that operated out of there is just amazing. You've got Ricky Chung, this guitar, amazing guitarist, and other artists as well. And there were other people hanging around there. So you had people like Robert Palmer, who were providing backing vocals, and Sly and Robbie used some of the backing musicians for their own band, Black Uhuru, who I think I've mentioned in one of my other episodes, or I think probably on my music podcast. So anyway, I'll call it a stop there. I know I've overrun again. It's actually pretty difficult to keep this under 10 minutes because there's so many things to think about when you think about various flourishing things. So thanks once again for listening. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next video.